Hello again, I'm from Sofia, Bulgaria, and I've been meaning to make a quick video about Bulgaria's reaction to the pestilence of 2020 that lasted until about 2022. Now, why am I making this video? Because this is a thing that's in the past, and who actually cares about this nowadays? Well, I'm one of the people that cares because I'm harshly judging countries and people by their reaction to the pestilence, and uh, I still am judging by that standard. I'll tell you this much, for example, I'll never be interested to either live or even visit either Canada, Australia, or New Zealand. I've had my doubts about Austria, but I still go there every now and then. But the other countries are on my block list just because of their reaction and how people went along with it, and that frightens me, really, and it's not a place I want to be in. Now, many people see Bulgaria as this sort of redneck state where there's no rules and regulations, uh, or they see it either, well, both coming from complete ignorance, or they see it as a place, sort of a commie place where there's strict rules or whatever, and you're not free to do anything whatsoever. Uh, I'll tell you this much, Bulgaria is neither of both, and many people have misconceptions about this country and how it functions. And you can draw a lot of conclusions about every country and every nation based on how they reacted to the pestilence. The same goes for Bulgaria. Now, what is actually a personal thing, but I didn't take the jab. I've never thought about doing so, and I'm happy with my choice nowadays. Never considered it, and when I started feeling pressured, especially when I was working in the Netherlands, I only got more resistant, so it was a big no from me, and only grew stronger in my personal decision. A completely personal decision. I'm not necessarily anti, but I just decided I don't want it, and that's reason enough, isn't it? And many people would be surprised to hear that the initial reaction of the Bulgarian government was quite strict. So initially, the city was closed off in the sense that you couldn't drive uh, on the highway to go outside. It was literally fenced off by police. At like the extreme danger point. Well, you know what I'm talking about. However dangerous it may have been, and people actually got fined when they were supposed to be at home and quarantined, and they went out to get cigarettes, for example. They get huge fines of many thousands of leva, many thousands. So they were quite harsh in the beginning. Then we've had many waves of ups and downs of regulations where restaurants either needed to be closed completely or to close at 10 a.m. or you needed to make reservations of some sort. All of this just went on and off all of the time, and then they made a huge mess of the travel regulations as well, where you either couldn't go to certain places, uh, or when you would come back, you would need to be in quarantine or you would need to take a test. And people started going to Tanzania and to Zanzibar in particular, because there it was free and relaxed. And the government put Tanzania, in particular Zanzibar, on the red list. So they just tried to actively bother people. And the rules were always sort of unclear and sort of vague. I mean, you could look them up, but it never truly made any sense. Now, where the redneck sort of argument comes from, basically the sensible argument that people did whatever they want, is, well, they didn't buy it. Initially, they did for a couple of weeks, and people were actually frightened just like everywhere else. But eventually, they realized there was nothing much going on. Apart from the official narrative, the high mortality rates that are actually quite significant, some of the highest in Europe, but Bulgaria has the highest mortality in general. Um, People eventually became really lax, they stopped caring for the rules. And eventually, what happened is that Bulgaria did implement a green certificate where you officially couldn't go into restaurants without the sort of app or the paper on their phone, and you couldn't go into the shopping mall even. So that has been sort of obstructive as well, and that was in the last phase. And after that, it's sort of phased out. Now, what's actually really sad is that the elderly people that really watch the government television and stuff and the advertisements, because we literally had ads in the street how the jab saves lives, just claims in the bus stops, and it was really kind of pushed, but not so much as in the Netherlands where you would get invitations on uh, the post or on your phone to go get the jab. It wasn't that much, but you could voluntarily take it, and without it, your life became sort of bothersome. But in Bulgaria, it's a horribly corrupt country, and for better or worse, people, many at least, managed to bribe their GP and to sort of get the certificate and still continue life as in the early days. Now, how many people actually really took the jab, I don't know, and I'm honestly not quite interested to know. I can tell you this much: most of the people around me don't have it, and that includes very, very highly educated people who just said, no, I'm not doing it. In the Netherlands, it's the radical opposite, where my father, for example, only knows me who didn't take it. I'm literally the only person he knows. Can you imagine? But the elderly people, they get sort of frightened because, first of all, they're really poor, they're on small pensions, they cannot afford anything. And you see them cowering away in the trams back in the day with these old masks on that they've probably worn 100 times, and they're actually afraid to get sick like the poor old people, and many probably did because it was dangerous for certain people. But the thing is that they had these really strange regulations off and on all the time, with a mask, without the mask. Eventually you had to wear a mask outside for about a week or two. It was quite short, but I remember it. Many people will say, oh, we didn't care about the COVID back in the day. Bulgaria isn't strict. We didn't have the rules. Well, we did, and it was bothersome because uh, the government sort of was either never really strict or never really loose. So you never had a sort of idea what to expect, and eventually people did require it to go to their job, to the office, but it wasn't really strict or enforced. But you always live under pressure in this country, especially if you're on a low salary. You don't know what's going to happen if you have a restaurant, for example. The government will just close you down, and then it will say, oh, you can open till 10, oh, you cannot sit inside, you can only sit outside. And it just keeps being like a festering wound for 3 years. And that's where I'm actually quite critical on Bulgaria. And I think the only reason that I got through it unscathed is because I worked from home, I had my income, I wasn't bothered, I am not a business owner, I don't need to go to the office, and I don't need to travel unless I want to. But otherwise, if I was less well off, the government would have actively bothered me very much, and not in a very transparent or clear way. So, yeah, not a compliment for Bulgaria. Although, on the long term, I would obviously much prefer being here over anywhere in Austria, New Zealand, and Canada, which are on my blacklist. I will never set foot in those countries in my lifetime. And Bulgaria has a lot going for it, where in the sense that if you were to have your farm or whatever, you could definitely just live without having noticed any of it. But now back to the mask thing outside, so I'm jumping a bit from one topic to the other. Eventually, you had to wear it outside. Many people probably won't remember, but I do. And at some point, because people are sort of poor, especially old people, and they cannot really afford to buy a box of these surgical masks, because it will cost like $10, which they would rather buy bread and yogurt from, because that's the only thing the sad pensioners in Bulgaria eat. It's a diet of tomatoes, cucumbers, bread, and yogurt. It's like the full staple of the Bulgarian pensioners' diet, and if they're unfortunate enough or don't have family supporting them, they would take those things straight from the garbage can, as I can see on literally any given moment when I look over my balcony edge. And yes, I do walk out to help the people because they have my sympathy. But just because the masks were sort of expensive and not everybody had them, the rules were that you could also wear a towel around your face. Literally, Bulgaria's government is a complete clown government. Where isn't there a clown government nowadays? I don't know. Let me know if you find a place. But at least they made such a strange decision that they said uh, you can also wear a towel around your face for protection. So you actually saw some people walking outside with a towel wrapped around the face in that moment. And also in the tram, you saw just these pensioners with some towel that's not covering anything, but it's all they had. And actually, there were fines when you would not have a mask in the metro. And many people would wear it sort of half, and it wasn't that strictly enforced. But when you did see police walk around, you would see people put on the mask like more tightly, and the fine was 300 leva for not having a mask in the metro, which is 150 euros, which is a pretty big hit, especially for people with families or pensioners. Now, there was one person who actually took the fine to court and it couldn't be enforced. Surprise, surprise. So he actually won the court case against what was it, the municipality, something like that. And I haven't been actively bothered by anyone or questioned by anyone for my reasoning, whether I would participate in anything or not. People, at least I can say for the Bulgarians, pretty much left each other alone. And perhaps you would say, oh, that crazy situation perhaps was only applicable in Sofia. No, it was not, because even if I would call to a hotel in Mirkovo, for example, a small town outside of Sofia, and say, hey, can I spend the night? They would say, yes, but you need a green certificate. And the same goes for some mountain huts, like deep in the Balkan mountains. Some mountain huts still requested it. Like it's the minority, but you had a sort of division in the country where it's sort of 50-50 that sort of wiped their ass with the measures, and the other 50% that sort of went all for it. Those are also the people who took the jab, which is all okay, it's personal decisions, which coincidentally for Bulgaria also happened to be the most pro-EU people. So you really do see this divide in the country. You've seen it back then. But a good thing is that people haven't actively bothered each other very much, as was the case in the Netherlands, where you had like 90% for the measures, 10% against. Eventually that switched and people became more skeptical. But Bulgaria is a country with a lot of government distrust, a lot, and I would say perhaps the division is not even 50-50, but it was 80-20. 80% didn't buy anything at all, didn't believe it, but they had a business and they sort of needed to participate, it's how it goes. The government can make her life hell if they want to in Bulgaria, except that often they don't have the capacity. They did, however, patrol the streets and the stores, whether people were wearing their masks or not. As I said, in the metro as well, and I did wear it because, I didn't want the fine, even though I was eventually quite interested to get the fine as well, because I wouldn't mind making a court case out of it either, but I didn't do anything eventually. And it sort of passed, it was over, and then nothing happened again. They did have tests when you came into the country as well, and often if you were a Bulgarian resident, you had the opportunity to test within 24 hours after arrival, and then you would need to text your result or your certificate to the authorities, and then they would approve and you would be released from quarantine. So I'll tell you this much: Bulgaria was neither a vagabond state where there were no rules. Countries where there were no rules and they absolutely never cared are Egypt and Mexico and probably Tanzania. Like that sort of countries, it would have been a blast to spend the 3 years there. In Bulgaria, we had ups and downs, and it was neither the strictest in Europe, which was Austria and Italy, which were completely ridiculous and plenty of reasons never to live there. But it was neither the least strict because that would have been Sweden.